Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Sharon, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Now, we just met a couple of weeks ago. We're Rethink Retail, top retail experts, and so we're connected in that community, and we're connected, as I said, in person. We met for the first time. So looking forward to the conversation. Now, where am I finding you today?
Well, I am sitting in a hotel in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Come on, that's amazing. What are you doing in Sao Paulo?
So I just finished a keynote yesterday with TOTUS, which is a Brazilian oracle.
Oh, very good. Very good. Now, do you travel? You're based in New York City. Do I have that right?
Normally, yeah.
Normally, but you're on the road a lot. Is that a fair statement?
I'm either in New York or on an airplane. Also based on an airplane.
Well, so we've met, but I don't know a whole lot about you. And of course, the folks listening may or may not know much about you. You were on the main stage at the Retail Council of Canada Store Conference recently. Tell us who you are, a little bit about your origin story, your background, what you do for a living.
Yeah. So my name is Sharon Guy. It's my name, funnily enough, and I was just talking about this with someone yesterday. What's in a name is the name, I guess. And I'm sharing a lot about what's happening in AI, specifically generatives or general AI, which funnily enough is also the acronym of my last name. So
it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, and I swear I didn't change my name in 2022.
What do the kids say? Manifested. You manifested your whole career based on your last name. Now you have a Canadian connection, right? Did I see that you went to McGill?
I did. I grew up in Canada.
Oh, fantastic! And where'd you grow up? What part of Canada?
Vancouver.
Nice. And then moved on. Now you did some work with a small company out of China called Alibaba. Tell us about that.
So the way that I joined was pretty interesting because one random day I received this LinkedIn in-mail from one of their VPs, and it said that he was employee 52. And at the time, Alibaba was around 100K some people. So when you receive an LinkedIn in-mail from someone who claims they are employee 52, you pay attention.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was an invitation to an event they were hosting at Asia Society, which is a think tank in New York that gathers a lot of minds and thought leaders that deal with Asia politics, Asian economic things. And I went, and it turns out it was a recruiting event. But it was right around the time when Alibaba was globalizing or acquiring different companies around the world. And oddly there, I met my high school roommate after about 10 years. And I bump into her and she's like, "Oh, you're thinking about going back to China to work as well?" Because she's Chinese. And I said, "No, I actually didn't really have that intention. But hey, after the course of a couple of hours, how my life changed." And after that event, I found myself in China, joining the company, working in the heart of Chinese e-commerce within this sub group. They call it a business group called Tmall. Which is China's Amazon.
What a ride. What was your experience of going from Vancouver to working in China, particularly at that time, right? If there is only 100,000 employees, it means it was fairly early on in the Alibaba. I mean, the late 90s and early 2000s were just explosive growth. What was that like?
So, I mean, first of all, the culture in a Chinese tech firm is something that I would not recommend to everyone, only if you have the stamina or the will for challenge for it, because it's very intensive. First of all, Chinese work culture is a beast of its own, and added to that, a Chinese tech culture is a larger beast of its own. And there's a lot of pressure for growth, for user growth, GMV growth, revenue, profit. Every single metric under the sun is sort of under pressure, and that's, generated from more of a top-down culture politically. And if you have seen anything in the past couple of years, the things that's exported from China, we used to get goods made from China, right? But now in the courses of around 17, 18, 19, we've seen algorithms being exported from China, from the likes of TikToks and Tmu's and Sheins. And now we're, I think, entering a new phase of brands that's being exported from China. And I mentioned this during RCC Store too, because the CEO of Showcase uses this as his exact business, which is these IPs from this company called PopMart. If you're if the algorithm has hit you with these labubus that are just virally permeating all of Gen Z and pop culture, and that's also something from China that's come into the scene. So I think in those years that I was in China, I think I witnessed a lot of high growth, whether it was from a tech company perspective or from a brand perspective, and that template for growth is probably my biggest takeaway.
Interesting time, both experiencing the culture and that kind of hyper growth cycle. Now they don't have any more hours in the day than we do anywhere in the world. Is it just more intense? It's just there's intensity when I talk to people everywhere, but it sounds like the measurement was very intense and the metrics are very intense. Yeah.
Actually, in China, they have 25-hour days. I don't know how it works, but, that's just 25, sometimes 26. Sometimes the hours just kind of appear.
Yeah.
I think it's also just cultures of different companies, too. I mean, I've left Alibaba by now, so I'm much more open with talking about work culture there and what they're doing and what I also believe in. But I think it's also similar to any sort of firm that is in a hyper growth stage. A lot of people that work there will sort of work and live there, so your lives are sort of intertwined.
Yeah.
When your peers or maybe your spouse are all within the company, it's kind of hard to separate those lines. And I think that definitely contributes to the hypergrowth that the company has experienced. It's also one of the strategies, I think, also with a lot of these tech firms in China, where you create these ecosystems where you're sort of living, breathing everything about the company, for the years that you're there.
Right.
I mean, I think Li Ka-shing also did it in Hong Kong with his retail telecom empire, where he also had tons of thousands of employees that sort of was in that bubble, and that's why you kind of it's hard to part from it.
Right.
But it's definitely a very interesting experience if you get to experience it.
No kidding. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk about what you talk about most often, which is AI, Gen AI, and I also want to talk a little bit about agentic AI from a retail perspective. So, where are we on a scale of, I don't know what sport you follow. I don't know if you're a baseball fan or whatever. What inning are we in? Sometimes I ask people, but what's your take on where we are in the evolution? And I picked up. I've picked up from the stage, maybe the easy parts are done, if we can put it that way, that the hard parts are starting in AI. But you tell me, what are you thinking, and how are you thinking it's going to impact retail today and tomorrow?
The past couple of years, the biggest change in retail is the personalization aspect, where products, content, stories are a lot more customized to that user or to that specific demographic and interest of that user, to enable him or her or they them to click and be consumed with that piece of content mind space. It's a constant fight for sort of their attention or eyeballs. And I think the next era is going to be the ease of shopping. And on stage, I shared a lot about how I think eventually the likes of ChatGPT is going to compete with an Amazon or any marketplace where before, or any shopping website, because a lot of these models we've already seen are starting to scrape data from different websites. ChatGPT already struck a deal with Shopify to that if you are a seller on, or if you're using Shopify, that your products can absolutely appear within a answer engine like ChatGPT if a user is querying for your product. Before it launched, there was actually a form that you can go on ChatGPT to fill out. If you sold a physical product, you can actually fill out the form. And I guess it was sort of a beta or a test case that prior to fully launching, they wanted to test and run.
Now, the risk is, now, what my experience as a shopper is, I don't experience much of any of that. So I have very particular, like whether it's, I see cookie based, I search for grass seed and I get a bunch of grass seed ads. Nothing new about that. But nothing very interesting really that I've seen towards me. I still get promotions from some major retailers that are totally irrelevant. And I'm not seeing yet what you're describing. Is it just I'm not a good shopper, or is it just not being adopted fast enough here? Or I can't tell the difference. What do you think? What do you think I'm seeing, or what's your perception of the progress of actually using AI to personalize? Because I do hear that a lot, the personalization. So far, I see it I'm just going to, generate more tweets. They may or may not be personalized. How are you experiencing that?
I think you're talking about it from a certain type of customer journey, where it sounds like your customer journey starts at Google, a larger search engine, or you're hit with an ad when you are
or Instagram
reading a blog or Instagram or one of those apps. What I'm talking about is the way that shopping will change because of our over reliance on these LLM tools. So there's about 500 million users of ChatGPT already, and that number is growing at an extremely rapid pace. They had a surge of users, more surge of users in the past 3 months than they did in the entire course of launching. So as we ask it to do everything from our little work tasks to sometimes even dispelling a argument that you have with your spouse, because I know my husband always brings in ChatGPT to settle an argument that we have between us.
It's what the computer said, so it has to be true.
Yeah. So he always he's it's like God's word. This is the truth.
And of course, your retort to that is, show me your prompts. Exactly.
Exactly. Which can be very biased, which is why that answer is that answer.
Should retailers fear this? Like, when I think about agentic AI, and I think it was Amazon that was going to launch a bot that would go find you. Of course, it would be biased to Amazon, but would go find you product. Is this just another intermediary between retailers and their customer that they have to manage, just like they manage Google?
No, I think what retailers need to do is to figure out a way for your product to show up in an answer engine, like a Claude or a ChatGPT. And it might take restructuring of your websites. I think if you're selling a product or a service, your job in the future is going to be managing a very clean database of the SKUs that you're selling. So to maintain extremely pristine product detail pages, so that when a potential customer is asking for a certain question or thinking of buying a certain type of category, that it's your brand that shows up instead of your competitors.
Now, I would have heard the same thing 10 years ago about Google. You if you're not there with a clean list, you're not there and you're out of contention. Is it more aggressive with ChatGPT? Because I'm sure retailers listening are like, yeah, that sounds like what I would do with Google today. But what is it like with ChatGPT and the LLMs?
I think it's a lot more long tail. I think when we write, or when we're currently working on our product detail pages, or the PDPs that I see, that retailers have on their e-commerce websites, it's still quite general. Some PDP is no more than a couple hundred words. But yeah, I mean, that's a good analogy. It's quite similar, but it just has to be a lot more detailed, a lot more long tail, a lot more well managed for AI.
Because it's often said that your ChatGPT or AI can just get you to the wrong place faster if the data is not, as you say, pristine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about the time you spent on the stage at Store here in Toronto. You had, as you mentioned, you had Samir Kulkarni from Showcase. You had Kieran McGuire from Canadian Tire. What were your takeaways from that session? What did you guys talk about? Share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So I left Canada in 2013 or so. So I actually did not know about Showcase, had not been able to visit one of Showcase's stores. So it was pretty interesting for me to just learn about his company and what it did and the similarities with this sort of Chinese retailer called Miniso that has been popping up everywhere in the US, everywhere around the world, really.
Yeah, it's here too.
It's very similar. Yeah, they operate with a similar model where Samir is also scraping the internet about the latest trends, and then that's how he manages his inventory to sell the products that he thinks will sell easily with a younger Gen Z type of shopper. And then on Kieran's side, she was pivotal in her work in creating a customer-facing chatbot that Canadian Tire just released. I think their mascot is the little Canadian Tire triangle, where if you are inputting a brand of a car that you own, that they can link you to the correct car parts more easily and help you and help with findability, because when as a normal shopper, when you go to Canadian Tire, that whole navigation screen can be a couple of clicks to get to what you actually want. So her tool is enabling that shopper to get to that product faster and hopefully help with conversion too.
Right on. It streamlines us. What do you think is the biggest misconception retailers have about AI and integrating AI into their strategy? I've heard descriptions, everything from it's like having, 400 interns to it's going to replace a whole tranche of roles. How do you think retailers are thinking about it? What are they not thinking about it correctly, perhaps? And how should they be thinking about AI in their business?
I think it's mostly from definitely a cost-cutting perspective is probably what they might not be thinking about. I think when they're looking to involve more quote-unquote AI in their business, it's always, how can we innovate on something better, or how can we add this new feature that we think our shoppers are going to like? When I think of the biggest contributor to AI for retailers is probably you can outsource a lot of your work to it if your workforce is using it well, and you can cut down on a lot of costs that you might either you're outsourcing to a BPO company or you're hiring a lot of people to finish. We're also in a economic time or a retail era where there's so many cost cutting measures that have to be in place. And this is sort of the time where if you know how to use AI well, you should be the one to survive.
Retail evolution or devolution or whatever. Yeah.
So even the first story that I showed that I talked about in my keynote is, there might be a day where this drone arrives with this product that you had never ordered from. There was no website that you went to click on buy. It was just simply sent to you. Although it sounds very sci-fi into the future, and it actually is a story from a sci-fi novel. I absolutely do think that is a probable scenario. And I think I first started telling that story in 2021, 22. And I just remember the audience looked so like their jaw dropped when I told that story. And then I noticed that as I'm starting to tell this story in 2025, there's less jaw dropping.
More nodding of heads. Like,
more,
oh,
yeah. There's
great.
more like, oh yeah, like there's more people that's with me in the sense that they do believe that it will happen. So I also find that that's rather interesting that it's just been 3 years, but it is becoming more and more possible. So
it's a quick evolution, right? I mean, if we think back 20, 25 years ago to what used to be called collaborative filtering, where they would say people who buy this, and Netflix does it, if people who look like you are listening or watching to this movie, you might like this movie. Like, it's the same thing except delivered to your doorstep, and you can always return it. I guess that's the theory, right? Is we get to know you so well that we can anticipate what you need next. Are we on the cusp of that? Is that happening? Do you see that in the next year, next 5 years, where that actually becomes real and reliable? How do you think about the future?
I think it's absolutely already true in China. So there's a little app called Taobao. If you have ever heard of that, it's sort of synonymous with Tmall. If you're a brand and you sell in China, well, actually, if you're a brand and you don't know Taobao and Tmall, definitely get to know it because it has the user base, the stickiness of that user base is rivals that of Amazon or even a little bit more. And when I joined Taobao Tmall, I remember we used to have human people fix our homepage, so the first screen that people see when they open the app. And then the year that I left, or throughout the years that I was there, we started to remove piece by piece these human anchored, whether it was a banner that we would intentionally put there, or a icon of some sort, or a campaign that some brand is doing. Year by year, the level of human touch that we would enact onto that homepage lessened, to the point where there was one year where everything that would show up on your home screen was generated there by AI. So it was...
was it better or was it cheaper?
The reason why our product managers decided to do that is because through A/B testing, we found out that there was just more GMV when we let our algorithms take over. More people added to cart, more people converted, versus when human intent, or when a human went in and anchored a certain brand for a certain campaign onto the homepage. And so that's why it took over. But these days, there's also been a change of strategy in that company. So I think if you now open Taobao, a bit more of that homepage is more anchored by humans. I mean, it's sort of changing all the time. But that was also around the time where Douyin came in and took a lot of Taobao Tmall's GMV. Douyin is the mother of TikTok.
Yeah, I was going to say we'd know that as TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question. There's many lessons that we can learn. Retailers here in North America can learn about retail in China. The environment's different. It's much more digital first than it is store. I mean, e-commerce is 50+%. So there's a difference in the market, and some things translate and are effective, and some things aren't. And I've heard that that's in some ways boiled down to payment systems, the wonderful deep integration of payment systems and super apps in China. And then I think about things like video commerce, which has never really taken off here, and certainly not in the way that it did in China. So are there differences in the market that we should look to China and Asia for lessons, but not direct lessons? Like we should just infer things? Or how do you parse the two? But this will work in North America because this is just really pan global, and here's some things that are just very unique to, if not just the culture, but also the operating system that exists in a country like that.
I just did this project with Huggies, the diaper company, with Kimberly Clark, where we gathered teams from their China team, their US team, and we did this sort of redesign or rebrand and a brand strategy for them. And in that, we had several people who came from the China e-commerce space, and it was their global team. So people joined from the UK, the US, all around the world from that brand team. I think what they took away when they listened to us, or when they listened to those of us who had worked with a Chinese e-commerce, or we also had Chinese influencers join in the call, is the level of inspiration and creativity that they can take, that those are the lessons that they can borrow. The way that stories are told or things are talked about, and the way that content is created, and the unpredictability sometimes that brands can bring, that adds to the stickiness or the interest, the level of interestingness that a brand can provide.
Typically not a word that I associate with consumer packaged goods brands, unpredictability, right? Is that the kind of the key takeaway from that meeting?
Yeah. So the thing that we shared was the blind box concept, which, going back to Pop Mart, it's if your listeners ever want a fun trip in the shopping mall, and we all know how more interesting shopping malls need to be if they want to survive, is they need to have these stores where it's a, because I think, retailers talk about customer experience and an unveiling of a new type of store, giving the consumer a better experience. I mean, those are all sort of markety words, but I think what they're all hitting at is the same thing. And I think that blind box concept can absolutely be applied to CPG brands. And that's something that we kind of shared that we did, which is, or the reason why blind boxes became so popular is because the outer packaging is the same, but inside, what's inside is very different. And that's the unpredictability aspect, but it also adds to the surprise and just the funness of discovering whatever is inside that box. And that concept started with these little toys, figurine things in China, but then it went into food, it went into fashion and travel, and all sorts of industries started to pick it up. And
so it's
now it's just
discovery.
called the blind box concept in retail. And because this phenomenon has come over to the US at least already, I expect it to bubble up, balloon, and probably other places in the next couple of years.
All right, listeners, you heard it here. Last words, last question, words of advice for the retailers listening. 2 starts and 1 stop. 2 things they should start doing right now, if they're not already doing it, and 1 thing they should maybe do less of.
They can start by going to my website, SharonGuy.com, to submit their email addresses and subscribe to this excellent newsletter that I write every couple of weeks with my thoughts, observations, and I try to be always as neutral, objective, and balanced as possible to just bring useful things to people, to make them think a bit more. That's at least what I try to do with a lot of my keynotes, is just to open people's eyes and minds a bit more to new concepts, new cultures, new ways of doing things, because I think we're at a time where, especially when everybody is so overusing AI and, like you said, writing the emails and writing the tweets, we're all going to sound like each other, and you really don't want to do that. So, I think there's a lot of retailers that's hopping in the bandwagon of starting to use AI to generate a lot of these things. I think that's good. I'm definitely a supporter of that, but just be mindful that when everyone is doing that, you better be thinking of the next thing that somebody is not doing. And that is going to be your only way of survival.
Well, great insights and great last thoughts. Thanks so much, Sharon, for joining me on the mic. Real treat to listen to your background and get your learnings. We'll be sure and encourage everybody to sign up for that newsletter. Sounds fantastic. So listen, safe travels home or wherever your next port of call is. And I wish you continued success in everything you do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.